that's keeping with the spirit of the original. Because if you watch Star Wars, none of them can act. And Harrison Ford is a little bit better, but even he's not great.
There's a lot of scenes in Star Wars where Harrison Ford is looking off into just the vacant distance. Welcome back to Cartridge Based Radio. I'm Donald, once again joined by Brad.
Hello!
Happy New Year, Brad.
Oh, same to you.
It's 2018.
Yes.
The year of hope and optimism. And how about we do our Game of 2018 award?
I see a problem with that logic, in that most of the games of 2018 have not come out yet.
Well, us being who we are, why don't we just dial the clock back a few years and give it to the game of 1988?
All right, so we're doing Game of the Year 1988. I like this idea because, you know, all the other publications that do Game of the Year awards, like they'll do it in December. There's no way that they've had time to really fully analyze and appreciate the games that they played throughout the year. I mean, if you played something in November and you give it an award in December, I mean, has it really processed or sunk in? I really feel like 3 decades is the amount of time it takes to correctly hand out a Game of the Year award.
All right. It was a good year for video gaming in 1988.
Yeah.
Lots of NES cartridges just flowing like water. And would you like to announce our game of 1988?
Yeah. We did a lot of research on this. It was a long discussion. And as you said, a lot of great games came out that year. A lot of games that coincidentally we can afford on this podcast budget. Not that that's why we decided to do a Game of the Year from 3 decades ago.
Nope.
Nothing at all like that. But yeah, after a lot of debate and, discussion, I think we're ready to say that the Game of the Year for 1988 is Mega Man 2. So let's talk about it. Let's do a show on Mega Man 2.
Brad?
Yeah.
We did a show on Mega Man 2.
Oh. Yeah, it was like our 3rd episode, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mega Man was the bad guy and Dr. Wily was trying to save the environment.
Oh, man. Yeah, like maybe Mega Man's like a virus or something that just kills and takes over.
Yeah.
Shoot. That's a good episode.
It's a really good episode.
We're not going to top it by talking about that game again.
No, I mean, although we could talk about Mega Man 2 again.
I mean, I'd be willing to, but I'm not sure that it's going to make for great podcasting. Man, I went all in on this Game of the Year thing. I don't really... Contra was our runner-up. Do you want to just talk about Contra?
Sure, let's talk about Contra.
Game of the Year runner-up 1988.
It's just an honor to be nominated. You get your own show.
At the award show, as we read off the Mega Man 2 wins, it just cuts to the 2 shirtless guys with their headbands sitting in the audience, like trying to look happy for Mega Man, but, secretly just crushed.
But they get their time in the spotlight now.
Do you suppose, Mega Man gets up on the stage with Dr. Light and, Dr. Wily and all the robot bosses behind him and, reads off a big thank you, and I just want to thank Yuka-chan's Papa and Fishman, who couldn't be here.
No one gets up on the stage with him because he's killed them all and consumed their essence. And he's like, I would just like to thank all the people inside of me right now. So you said it a couple seconds ago, so let's talk about it. A lot of people complain, and it might be Japanese games in particular, that the less clothing that a female character wears, the more armor she has on. So the Contra guys, under that logic, are armored to the teeth because they're just wearing form-fitting Levi's and their bare chests.
Given how Contra goes, though, I would say that they're disproving that theory pretty hard because they can take no damage.
One shot and you're dead.
One shot and you're dead. Not only that, if you get hit by a rolling pin going along the floor, you die. That wouldn't kill me. At the next CBR podcasting gathering, we'll do a thing where I'll stand at one side of the room and you just roll a rolling pin along the floor and it'll hit me in the feet and we'll see if I die.
I'm going to feel really bad if you die.
I'm going to feel really bad for our fans if I attempt to do this without a shirt on.
You kind of have to now that you put it out there.
I'm going to have to get in shape now. Oh, this sucks.
You got to look like the Contra guys by the time we have our gathering.
So our next CBR gathering is going to be in about 5 years, everybody. Mark it on your calendars. Brad's going to be ripped, and Donald's going to throw rolling pins at him.
This is going to be on the poster. It's going to be great. Contra is about the worst alien invasion in the history of alien invasions. The art team said, hey, have you seen that Alien movie? Look at all this other Giger art I found. And then, for some reason, Konami had some leftover sprites of football players. Those are in there. You play blue guy and red guy.
Yeah.
Do they have names?
Yeah, they do, because they're in King of Fighters.
They're what?
No, I don't know who those guys are. They must be the Ikari Warriors or something, because it's all SNK characters. So yeah, I guess the Contra guys don't have names, but the Ikari Warriors do, and you can play as them in King of Fighters.
So the Contra guys, Jimmy and Billy,
Spike and Hammer,
Slide and Spring,
Blade and Striker.
So they're tasked in no actual way in Contra. You just hit the start button and you start going. No one gives them this mission. They're just in the jungle somewhere with machine guns, not fighting aliens at that point. They're just sort of fighting some government. Like, maybe they're like, you gotta go in and get the aliens.
I have a theory about this. And this game came out in 1988. It was still the Cold War back then. And pretty much any game like this that I see from that era, I assume that you're really fighting the Soviets. And then they're like, well, we can't actually say that. So you're fighting aliens that just happen to be like men with guns wearing red uniforms.
But you actually fight aliens in this game.
Yeah, later on.
And it's embarrassing the first time it happens. Because there's like this giant queen alien from Aliens looking head. And then these little tentacle arms with spike balls on the end come out. And it's this giant, massive torso with all these muscles. Then these little, like...
It's like a T-Rex.
No, it's worse than that. It's like the little inflatable things out in front of car lots that are like, whoa. And really, if you have the spread weapon... in this game, like, everyone wants, like, when you'd play, like, everyone get the spread weapon, it's the only one you need. You can just wreck this game.
I mean, you can just wreck this game. I suck at this game. I just get killed a lot. I think there's probably a reason that this game got famous for having a 30 life code in it.
We came to this discussion 30 years later, so you had time to beat Contra, Brad.
I had time, but not ability.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to shock you. You stop the aliens.
Oh, that's a relief.
And you sink an entire island.
That's less good.
Well, I mean, obviously it was the bad island that you were on.
I would love to be at the meeting where they, like, got back and they're like, you sunk an island under the ocean. Oh, it was the bad island. People lived there, and now, like, this is going to mess up earthquake patterns and such things.
You know how hard it is to sink an island? Because an island's just the top of a volcano, right?
Basically.
So this had to be a fake island that the aliens put there because it just sinks.
It's a floating island.
Yeah, you'd have to destroy an entire volcano to actually sink an island. It's like the people who thought California was going to fall off the United States into the ocean. Do you know the logistics of that? Like, the continental shelf? It's not just going to be like, boop, California's gone. If it goes, it's going to take, like, a big portion of the U.S. with it.
Yeah, specifically the portion that I happen to live in. So let's not do that. I always love it when people envision California falling into the ocean, and it looks like somebody took out a map and, like, with an X-Acto knife, like, cut out California's borders.
Nevada's beach property, yay! You cannot sink islands, you cannot push the whole of California off. Because believe it or not, the Earth doesn't respect your borders. It doesn't check an atlas before sinking things. You beat the aliens, and then they return for Super C, which you'd think is on the Super Nintendo, but no.
The only guess I have is that they hadn't even conceived that later on there'd be a game system called the Super Nintendo, and all the games would be required to have the word super in the title.
Yeah, there's nothing real super about Super C, though.
It's super forgotten in the archives of Contra games.
You could have called it Contra 2, and that would make Contra 3 make more sense.
Yeah.
But Super C is basically all the same graphical tiles, but they add Akari Warrior overhead sections, which are the worst
part of that game
because you have the crappy NES D-pad while trying to rotate your character in 8 directions to shoot.
Any of the games like that use the Akari Warriors control scheme were just a nightmare, including the Akari Warriors games.
It's like, let's make a twin stick shooter that doesn't actually have twin sticks. Like, we have just gotten to the point where that kind of game makes sense.
You know, the real shame of it is, like, you could remake those games now, and they'd be awesome. But I got the Time Soldiers for PlayStation Network, and that used the same control scheme, and it's still, like, they didn't have the budget or, profit motivation to convert it to work with the PS3 controller smoothly. So it's just like you press the shoulder buttons to rotate and you still just use the one stick.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, that game's already super hard, and at some point we'll probably do a show on it. But yeah, it sucks.
That's an easy way to describe Super C. It sucks.
There's your box quote. Right on the front of the box, too.
Is Super C or Contra that you run down the hallway?
Contra, you run down the hallway, and that's where they roll rolling pins at your feet and kill you.
So it's a sprite to look like a 3D hallway, and you're at the bottom running back and forth shooting up the hallway. And to its credit, it really gave a feeling of, wow, the NES is producing 3D environments. But for some reason, you have to jump through all the doorways. And I don't know if that's because they don't want to walk through the doorway or if they just want to look super badass while doing it. I imagine if you jumped and spun like Samus into a new room, you have the major disadvantage when entering that room.
Even when you land, I mean, you didn't just leap in, you did a flip. You didn't get a good look at the room prior to landing.
So, there's a lot of skulls in Contra, like human skulls that shoot at you. It gets a lot worse in Super C, where it goes into full Giger mode. But then, I'm sure this is the one that everyone's very familiar with if you love Contra. It's Contra 3 Alien Wars for the Super Nintendo.
Yes, everyone loves this game, and with good reason.
It's a really good game where they added shirts to the characters. So instantly some pretty high-tech stuff going on.
Oh yeah. Because now they have to render a shirt in addition to everything else.
It's gorgeous pixel art, and there's a lot going on. So much that I had to go back and check on videos of it running on actual hardware. I don't remember this when I was growing up, but now watching it, it's shocking. That game had some major frame rate issues. Like when they're tearing down the world around you and everything's blowing up, that frame rate would bottom out.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Which is weird because Contra Hardcore...
Yeah, I was just about to say, I did not get a chance to play Contra 3 in preparation for this episode, but I did play Contra Hardcore for the Genesis.
And it doesn't have frame rate issues, and I realized blast processing on the Sega Genesis.
I always thought blast processing just meant we can't make it look as good, but that means it runs faster. Like, it wasn't a conscious decision. It was just like, oh, this isn't going to look good. Oh, but look how fast it runs.
No, the Sega Genesis actually had a faster processor than the Super Nintendo, but the Super Nintendo had a much larger color palette, and it had that weird thing that's, backing of third-party developers.
Which was nice.
Oh, and the Nintendo name.
Yeah.
That helped a lot, too. But Contra Hardcore added the most important thing ever in a franchise, a wolf man.
I love that they Anytime that they had a decision to make, they're just like, what is the most awesome thing we can do? And they're like, add a Wolfman, add a robot.
So one of the Contra guys is there. I assume it's him, or the original two Contra guys were over fighting in Alien Wars.
Yeah.
But there's someone who must be the brother of Blue Pants guy, and his name is Ray.
It's such a ordinary name.
Least awesome name you can have.
It's just like, oh man, here's, Blade and Striker and Lightning and Ray.
Well, the lady's name in hardcore is Sheena.
Yeah, which is not like crazy, but it's a little more exotic, I guess. You don't meet a lot of Sheenas.
Yeah, it's a cool, like, I'm gonna save the world kind of name. And then you have Ray. But it gets worse from there. Because after you beat the first boss, your character says, who are you? And the guy says, I'm Deadeye Joe. Question about the first level in Contra Hardcore.
Yeah, we need to talk about the first level of Contra Hardcore.
So there's a giant robot rampaging through the city, and you get into a fight with this robot.
Which I definitely want to talk about, but before you fight the robot, you run through a barrage of fire, you fight an ant robot monster, something cuts down a building, and then you run up the side of the 45-degree angle building. This is an intense game.
It didn't seem to do any structural damage to the building that you're standing on to fight the robot when the other building fell into it.
They don't make them like they used to.
So, this robot, first he's way in the background, destroying the city. Then he flies over to you and dramatically lands in front of you. And then he attacks you, and right after he attacks you, he starts dancing. Like their giant war machine has the capability to bust a groove.
You see this guy in the background foreshadowing this fight, and he's just on the horizon of the city, and he just wipes out the whole city with a laser that he just sweeps all across the horizon and sets everything on fire. And then when he comes up, you're like, oh man, I have to fight that thing. And then he starts boogieing.
And then he only takes maybe 20 shots and he's dead. And instead of using the ultimate death laser on you, he picks up 57 Chevy Bel Airs and throws them at you.
I mean, you're fighting a robot that throws cars at you on top of a building as a Wolfman. That's how awesome this game is.
Not just a Wolfman with a Gatling gun arm.
That's not even the end of the level. You kill the giant, taller than a building robot that throws cars at you, and the game's just like, okay, good fight against the mini-boss, let's keep going.
There's 6 mini-bosses in the first level. And the Deadeye Joe fight, I don't understand how this works. You run up to him, and before he's even on screen, your character says, wait, there's a man in that machine. You haven't even made contact with this thing, and it looks like a robot, and they somehow know that there's a man in that machine.
And then he cuts a building in half.
He does, and it sinks straight down, which I've seen failures of people trying to demolish buildings, and then they don't fall down correctly. This guy is so precise. He makes a building drop into itself.
It's entirely possible that Contra Hardcore is just about you interrupting the planned, controlled demolition of maybe an abandoned part of the city. Yeah, they're like, we got to get these abandoned cars out of here, bring in the giant robot. We need to demolish these buildings, get Deadeye Joe in here. He's very precise with this building demolishing. And then the Contra guys are just like, I'm a Wolfman. I'm going to shoot everything. Ooh!
So you defeat Deadeye Joe and he jumps out of his robot suit, proving that you were right. But there's a problem with that scene. Deadeye Joe's as tall as his robot suit. And during that fight, the torso of that robot suit separates from the leg and flies around. And then reattaches. But then Deadeye Joe pops out, and Wolfman at no point asks, how did you separate yourself and not die?
So on top of being awesome at demolition and a pretty tough boss, Deadeye Joe's also an awesome magician. He can do the saw himself in half trick.
He also has a move where he just spins his upper half while still attached to his legs. I mean, that's gonna just throw your spine out.
It's all hidden compartments and mirrors. And probably, like, he's got a body double that's in the bottom half of the suit, like, scrunched over.
I mean, you are trusting the retelling of this story by a wolf man. So you might not be getting the most accurate story.
Do you remember what the wolf man's name is?
It was like Alex or something?
Maybe? I'm just gonna call him Barco from now on, because I don't remember. Yeah, you're getting Barco's version of events after the fact.
So Deadeye Joe jumps out, and he's like, I'm Deadeye Joe. And your character's like, who is Deadeye Joe?
Where did you come from? Where did you go?
And Deadeye Joe says, if you want to know more, chase me, and leaps off the screen. And then it gives you an option to chase him or return to the lab.
Deadeye Joe's basically a clickbait article.
Yeah.
Would you like to know more? Get into a plane chase with me.
So I didn't really care about Deadeye Joe. I wanted to go back to the lab.
Okay, this is the part where I have to make a confession. I was not very good at Contra Hardcore. Like, I was terrible at it. But I found out that the Japanese version is easier. It lets you get hit 3 times per life. So I played this game in Japanese, so I had no idea what I was choosing. I just, 2 choices, and I think I picked the first one.
That's Chase Deadeye Joe.
Right, and then I got into a plane chase.
So, spoiler, if you go the other way, you get into the exact same plane chase. But it starts out with you heading in the opposite direction, and your character, Barco, says, damn, exclamation mark. I will not be making it in time. And then a sky helicopter plane pulls up next to you, and the guy says, hey, you need ride? Jump on my machine. And then Barco says, the Sky Police, always in time. So I have a feeling that Contra Hardcore did not have much of a translation budget.
That could be entirely accurate. There's parts of the city where if you're walking around, people come up to you and they're just like, where do you want to go? I'll take you there, $2. And it doesn't matter where you're going. And I've never gotten a ride from these people because it didn't seem entirely on the up and up. But I mean, that's the thing that happens. So maybe this is like the future equivalent to that. Like just a random guy who will give you a ride to wherever for $2.
So you jump on the bottom of his airplane and you do some stupid fight with some missiles.
Well, dangling off of the airplane, yes.
That's right. And then you go airborne. And in possibly one of the greatest mistakes in video game history, they thought it would be cool to rotate the airplane. But they weren't on the Super Nintendo with the Mode 7 and the rotation and all that. So it's not smooth. It's literally 3 frames when the plane flips around. And if you're airborne, when that happens, you just suddenly fly off the side. So no jumping, but a guy keeps flying at you and trying to leg sweep you. So you have to jump him, but then the guys will rotate their machine and you fall off. Like, the Sky Police are terrible at their jobs. And the advanced machine looks like a Cessna when you look at it from the front.
Yeah, it is.
So that is the advanced Sky Police machine, a Cessna.
You know, I'm just kind of going through some of the screenshots that I took while I was playing through this game, and I don't remember when this happened, but there's a part where I'm on a motorcycle and a guy's running behind me with a missile held up over his head. Like, that's a thing that happens in this game.
Contra Hardcore is the best, but it's also extremely dumb.
You fight constellations. One of the boss of the 3rd level is constellations. You fight Sagittarius and Taurus and Gemini.
Well,
that's a thing that happens.
So I did some reading on Contra Hardcore. There are 2 endings.
Okay.
The good ending and the bad ending. If you chase Deadeye Joe, you get the bad ending. If you go back to the lab, you get the good ending. And also, you're going to be shocked by this, you get betrayed by your commander.
No.
Yes. He was behind it the whole time.
I think it's awesome that whether or not you get the good or bad ending depends on this arbitrary choice that you made with no information to base it on at the end of the first level. And then you play like 4 or 5 more impossible levels and it's like, oh, bad ending. Guess you should have followed Deadeye Joe or gone to the lab, whichever it was.
It's called replay value, Brad. Oh, and all the bosses in this game, Contra Hardcore, super suck in a way that most Contra bosses don't. They named it Contra Hardcore, and they're like, this is going to be for the hardcore players. So here's a boss with like a 1 pixel avoidance of boxes falling over at random. Like the lab boss is just this monster hanging from the ceiling that stacks boxes, then hits them at you.
Have you ever seen the videos of like the robot laboratory that's building robots that can work in warehouses or whatever? It tries to stack boxes and they'll knock the boxes over or they'll shove the robot or whatever. Like this is that thing getting its revenge.
Yes, this is a story of Boston Dynamics gone insane. This alien invasion. In hardcore, it's a robot invasion, which makes no sense. But because Contra's always been alien invasions.
You know, I'm starting to think about this now. Contra Hardcore might not have been intended to be a real Contra game. Like, compared to the other ones, this is really like boss rush Contra. There's very little of the run and gun sections are very short, and then it's just like boss fight, boss fight, boss fight. And, like, they have a Wolfman character. There's only one Contra guy, and he's got a shirt on. This might not have been a Contra game all along.
Are you saying sometimes companies put a known brand on a new IP just because they're afraid it won't sell?
Well, I would imagine, Super Mario 2, that this might be the first and only time that's ever happened.
I mean, it would never Black Flag happen in modern day.
I mean, it could be worse. At least they didn't, like, take a known, like, pizza brand and, like, add that to... They're like, well, this robot war game's kind of weird. Let's put the Noid in it.
I kind of want to play a Contra game with the Noid as the main character.
Contra Noid.
Noid Core.
Noid Core.
The spread pizza gun is pretty awesome. So, this alien invasion.
Yeah.
These aliens came from wherever. Probably one of the constellations you fought.
Probably a different planet.
They were somehow foiled by Jimmy and Billy's cousins, Spike and Jones, who shirtlessly took down their entire invasion, not once, not twice, 3 times. Like, you don't see any other military presence in this entire game other than 2 shirtless guys.
It could be that, like, the army is just like, oh, this looks easy, just send 2 guys. And it worked.
Okay, that's a fair point, actually. They won this entire war. I hear there was, like, some controversy around it. There was some trials, Iran-Contra or something. People were mad about it. Things went better for these 2 guys than the bad dudes.
Yeah.
The bad dudes were forgotten. These guys keep getting called up because the aliens keep trying to attack. And they do a super good job of it. They destroy everything every time they arrive, and then the 2 shirtless guys just show up and wreck their entire plan. In Contra 3, you are in the city when the U.S. Army shoots it with missiles and lights it on fire. I mean, these guys are so good that they don't even care they're in the city when they start bombing it.
They're like, yeah, it'll be fine.
And they have the coolest napalm. It keeps, like, rising up out of the ground in certain patterns as you hang on bars right above it. It's good they bombed that certain section because it had all those rails to hang on. It's considerate.
Yeah, thinking ahead. When we nuke our own guys, they're going to have a bar to hang on to.
Ample opportunity to escape. Contra 3 and Contra Hardcore. It goes beyond this into the further generations, but we couldn't be bothered with those.
Yeah, there are 2, maybe 3 PlayStation Contra games. The one came with 3D glasses, I think, which was a weird thing for that time.
I was excited for that game, and I purchased it. And I threw on my 3D glasses, and boy, was it underwhelming.
One of the PlayStation Contra games, it might have been that one, it might have been the other one. The only good thing about it was really the intro screen, where it just like shows them like loading their guns with like millions and millions of bullets. Like it's just bullets everywhere.
Hardcore was re-released on Xbox Live Arcade, but it's super anime, and it's nothing like Contra Hardcore for the Sega Genesis.
Okay.
And I have a feeling that Konami had a different title game, and they're like, this probably won't sell well unless it's one of our brands. And some random anime game about fighting robots was just named Contra Hardcore.
Is that the same as Hardcore Uprising?
Yes.
It could be that's really the true expression of what Hardcore was supposed to be all along, and then they actually, for the Genesis one, had tacked Contra onto it, like I had theorized earlier. I don't know, this is a very weird series.
We're not saying Konami is really bad at handling their IPs at all.
Suikoden.
They're totally the worst at handling their own IPs. Like, we have a soccer game, and that's popular. We have Metal Gear Pachinko machines. Super C's bad. Don't play Super C for the NES. Play Contra, Contra 3, Contra Hardcore.
Yes.
Or just play Contra Hardcore. It's dumb, and it's got a wolfman named Barco.
But if you've ever looked up at the sky and seen Taurus and thought, I want to kill that, this is your time.
If you ever want to have just boxes slapped at you by a robot, you can do that too. Hardcore is hard too.
Yeah.
I didn't know about Contra Hardcore till you brought it up, because I played Alien War on the Super Nintendo. So I'm super stoked to have this game in my life now, because it's hard and it's punishing, and I'm kind of into it. So, Brad, any final thoughts on Contra Alien Wars, or Contra Hardcore?
They're all really good games. I've played all of them. I've spent the most time with Hardcore. That was one of the ones that made the Genesis Top 50 when I was doing the Genesis website. Somewhere in the 30s. Really fun game. Really love how stupidly over the top it is. But really, you can't go wrong with, I won't say any Contra game, but you know, the three that we really highlighted, all great games, definitely worth checking out. Yeah, there's a reason that Contra, the original, almost won our Game of the Year in 1988, and probably any year that didn't have Mega Man 2 in it, it would have probably have won.
Yeah, maybe Contra 3 will have a shot when we get to 2020. Something like that. So, that was our illustrious Game of the Year episode for 1988. Congratulations, Mega Man and runner-up Contra.
Great job, Mega Man 2. You really earned it.
Thank you for consuming all those robots' souls. Thank you, Contra guys, for stopping the alien invasion so many times. Thanks, Deadeye Joe, for your magic act. If you want to reach us, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook. You can email us. All that's in the show notes. As usual, I am Donald. That was Brad. And we will see you next week.
So you know what's dumb is every time that we wrap up the show live, you know, like we did just now, I keep expecting to hear the outro music come in.
You want to hear something stupid? I expect it too.
and then while that's happening, I'm like, oh, I wonder what funny thing